Alright, welcome to Red Dead Online, and I want to do a series of videos about the real world counterparts to some of the guns that are in Red Dead. And the reason is because it kind of combines two of my hobbies. I am a little bit of a hobby gun connoisseur, I suppose you could say. I've got what I think is a decent starter collection of firearms, and more importantly, I have friends that have even more. So I can get my hands on some of the real-world counterparts to these guns. Not all of them, but some of them. And I thought it might be fun to talk about the differences between these guns in the game and the real-world guns. Not just the differences, but also the similarities, I guess. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull out the Cattleman, because we're talking about the Cattleman today, which is your starter pistol in both online and single player. And I think that it is $50 because they know, oh, I don't even remember seeing this one. See, this one's even $275. I think it's $50 because they know they can't hose you on it because you started with it. So everything else gets really expensive, but that one in particular, $50. So it's called the Cattlemen Revolver, and it's got okay damage, okay range, a good fire rate, decent reload, decent accuracy. So you can compare it to other guns, and it's a fairly balanced gun. Some of these others are better or worse in one area or the other. So anyway, it's a good balanced gun. You could really get away with not having any other guns as far as your revolver goes. If you wanted, you could roll with that gun, and it's just fine. So let's just check out the animation here of shooting it. So he cocks it, and then reloading. Reloading was fast. So I'm actually pretty impressed with the animation, because he is cocking the pistol and between shots, and then the shells do pop out the back whenever he's unloading it. And you can't see it very well there, but let's try this again. So anyway, that's really fast. And it's not nearly that fast in real life. It actually takes quite a while to reload those, to unload and then reload those. And I'll show that with a real pistol. I wanted to note one more thing. I was looking for world records on unloading spent cartridges from a single action army and then reloading live cartridges, and to see if there was some sort of a best possible time or a time to beat. And I can't find it. We have speed records for everything, and I can't see anywhere where somebody has set up a competition for unloading and reloading a single action army. I did find a post eventually where a guy just tried it, and I think this guy's probably got a lot of experience with it just based on his time. But he said he did it three times, and he averaged 18 seconds. So 18 seconds to unload and then reload a single action army. The reason I'm bringing this up, I don't know if he really did it or not, but that to me is a believable time if you're good at it. I can't do it anywhere nearly that fast, but if you've practiced a lot with that pistol, I believe you could do it in 18 seconds. I think that's probably actually a pretty good time, maybe not a world record time if somebody ever had a competition for it, but it's a pretty good time. And that's 18 seconds. That's a long time if you're in a gunfight. So I just thought I'd throw that in as well. The real-life counterpart to the Cattlemen Revolver from Red Dead Redemption 2 and Red Dead Online was the Colt single-action army revolver, also known as the Peacemaker. And here we have some replicas or near replicas of the Colt single-action army revolver. And I'll go through them really quickly. This is a Uberti
which is a company that makes replicas. It's an Italian company, and they import them here. They make a lot of different replicas, but this is a Uberti, what they call an 1873 Cattleman, interestingly enough. Actually, I'm sorry, this is the 22. This it is the same thing, but it is a 12-shot 22 revolver. It's essentially the same thing, just a smaller caliber with more shots. This is a Ruger Vaquero, and this is actually in 45 Colt, or 45 long Colt, as they say. And this is a very modernized version. And we'll go through some of the features here in a moment on that. But and then we have two. These are both Uberti 357 Magnum 38 Specials, which are basically the same as this 22. They're just the full-size version, essentially. So and they're really close to the same. These two are. Oops, there it goes. What can I say about these in general? I guess we'll go over some of the features here, because the goal here is to kind of show what they're like in real life. And you'll notice this one does have some shells in it, but they don't have primers or powder. These are basically training shells. So, but what you'll see is we have basically a firing pin, and it's just a pointy thing on the hammer, and that would interact with the primer. We'll show that up close here in a minute. You've got the frame, trigger guard, trigger, grip, the barrel, and this is the ejector, basically, this thing here. We'll show how that works here in a minute, and the cylinder. Now the way these things were aimed, the sights are pretty crude on these. You've got, if I can line it up somewhat on the camera, you've got this post and then this groove right here in the top of the frame. So it's a little bit crude, and what you'll notice on these is that you can't aim them when the hammer's down. Even on half cock you can't aim them, which doesn't matter because you can't shoot them without cocking it anyway. But and then some, supposedly according to legend, some gunfighters, anybody that would be drawing quickly from their holster, they would even file down these front sights, which makes it so you can't really aim it, and it's a point shooting kind of a thing. So on modern guns, most of these are a little bit different in terms of they usually beef up the frames a little bit on these, and then on this one you notice there's not a pointy thing here, and it has this bar that comes up in front of the firing pin. It's a safety mechanism to just make sure that you can't that it won't fire if you drop it or if something hits the back of the hammer. So these, and even this 22, has the pointy deal, which is the firing pin. I'm sort of jokingly calling it the pointy deal. And so and these have other safety mechanisms, I believe. I'm not exactly for sure what they are on these Uberti replicas, but essentially in the Old West, if something smacked the back of this hammer, it could fire the gun. So what most people would do was load 5 shots instead of 6. And one of the main things that I wanted to show was the unloading and loading process of these firearms. So we'll do that real quick, because obviously in the game it's pretty quick, and I very much appreciate the fact that it's quick. But in real life, you would have to put this thing on half cock, and that allows the cylinder to spin freely. On full cock it's locked up, and when it's not on half cock, when it's not cocked at all, it's locked up as well. So you put it on half cock, you open the loading gate, and then you use the ejector. Now these fall free because they have the bullets in them, so they're heavy. But on a spent, and also the cases aren't swelled. On a spent cartridge that's been fired, the case swells, and so you have to push this, clock it, push it, clock it, push it, clock it, push it, clock it, push it, until you have all the bullets out. Now the good thing is you could basically pop those out on the ground if you're not trying to save your brass. You don't have to catch them. Okay, but you have to go through that process. Then you tip the gun up, and there's different ways you can hold it, but basically put a bullet in, spin the cylinder, put a bullet in, spin the cylinder, and so on until you get them all in there. And I kind of laid these down here. There they are. So you can see that this would be a little cumbersome to load in modern terms, but not necessarily so in Old West terms, because the cap and ball revolvers before this, they were black powder, and they required you to load from the front, and you would put your powder down in there and whatever paper patches you were going to put in there, and you'd put the ball down in there. And then I think they would oftentimes seal the end of the cylinder, and you'd have to do that one at a time. There was a lever right here that you would push down to press like a ramrod, and it would lever down into the bottom cylinder. I think it would be the bottom cylinder. It's been a long time since I've fired a cap and ball, and I've never loaded one, but anyway, you'd have to rotate it around several times, and then on the back you'd see a nipple, and a percussion cap would go on that, and you'd have to rotate around and put all the percussion caps on, and then you could fire it. So it took forever to load those. And you can see those a lot in old Clint Eastwood movies, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. They use a lot of those, and the cylinders have been modified, or were modified in the Old West on a lot of those once metallic cartridges came along. They would bore through the back of the cylinder and convert them to cartridge weapons. But the ones in the movie still have the nipples on the back side of the cylinder, and so they're not really converted. So now, really quickly, I want to show how you would load this if you were going to do like this, the safety load. So essentially, what you do is you clock it to your first cylinder, and then you skip the next one, and then you load 4. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then, whoops, I'll leave that up so you can kind of see what happens, and then you cock it fully, and then let the hammer down. Now there's an empty chamber right under this hammer, and that means if something smacks the back of this hammer, it won't go off. Now when you're ready to fire, you cock it, that rotates around, there's our empty, and you fire that shot, cock it, fire the next shot, cock it, fire the next shot, and so on until you're out. And then you get to go through this process again. And you can see how cumbersome this would be to do that. Again, way better than cap and ball revolvers, but definitely difficult. Another thing to note, this holster doesn't have it, but this holster has this loop, and this was to basically keep the pistol retained when you're bouncing on a horse. And if you thought you were going to need to use this, you would slip the thong off of your hammer, and that way you could draw your pistol, because you can't draw it with the thong on there. So you'll read in like Louis L'Amour books and things like that of guys slipping the thong off of their hammer. Okay, so we're gonna pull the cylinder on this one, and while I'm pulling the cylinder, I will note that on those black powder guns, there were some guys that would carry extra cylinders, and you could swap the cylinders quicker than you can reload them. Basically on the cylinder, you've got these like gear kind of things here. That's what rotates it around, and then this is the locking down on the bottom. You'll see there's a thing that comes up to lock this into place. So there's the cylinder, and then here, I'll keep that open, it might make it easier. This is the locking bar or button, and you can see the hammers poking through right there. I think you can see that. Okay, and then there's a mechanism that comes out to rotate the cylinder around, and then this pops up. So you'll see that drops down. Now the cylinder can rotate. This gear mechanism comes out, and then that pops back up. Let's get that closer. Maybe it'll be easier to see. So there's the firing pin came through, fired the cartridge. We pull the hammer back, the lock bar goes down, and then the cylinder gets rotated and the lock bar comes back up. We can fire just like that. So that's how these operated in real life, and that's mostly what I wanted to show, because you know, in games it doesn't necessarily you can't necessarily see how it operate. And again, it's a good thing in a game. We're playing the game because we want to we want to have fun. We don't want to like sit there and have to reload guns correctly necessarily. If I can get this lined up. Okay, there we go. So that is these guns in a nutshell. The 1873 Cattleman is the Uberti. They go by a lot of different names. They were chambered in a lot of different calibers through the years.
I was going to talk a little bit more about the history of this pistol and kind of how it was adopted by the United States military, but my camera cut out on me, and that's probably for the best because the video is long enough. So anyway, it was produced in 1873 through some date that I don't remember, and there were a lot of them, and it's probably the most famous pistol in the world. And it is a pretty cool pistol, pretty classy pistol, and so obviously it's fun to talk about. And I'm actually really glad that it is the first pistol you get in the game. It's fitting. I would have also been happy if they had an older Colt revolver, a cap and ball that was, you know, less powerful and maybe slower to reload, and then you had to work up to this or something like that. So, but anyway, it's fine, and it's such a prolific pistol that it kind of makes sense. So, I'll skip all the history. I would encourage you, if you're interested in firearms or the Old West or whatever, to kind of go look up some of the drama about the adoption of, or the drama revolving around the bore-through cylinder patent and Colt's development of firearms, and then the Smith & Wesson development of firearms and the competition and things like that. It's kind of interesting. So with that, I will bid everyone adieu, and definitely, you know, I thank you guys for watching.